Wake up, everybody. We're running a little late. We've got a quorum now, I believe. We'd like to call K-12 Subcommittee to order. Madam Clerk, please take the roll.
Representatives Carringer. Representative Cassada. Chairman Sapicki. Representative Clemens. Chairman Haston.
Here.
Representative Hurt. Here. Representative Love. Chairman Reagan. Here. Chairman White.
Here.
Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Members, we have any personal orders before we begin? Seeing none. We'll go through the calendar and give you an update of where we stand on some of these. Some of them have been taken off notice and some have been rolled to the hill. We'll say that we are going to hold, at the end, we'll be calling up a bill and having that the department will be testifying on, and we'll have about 15 to 25 minutes there at the end that we'll end on that today. Just a heads up. Item number 1 is rolled to the hill, House Bill 2143. Next up is going to be, which one is the next one we got here? 7 is the next one. Is that what you've got? Item number 7, House Bill 2870 is rolled to the hill. Takes us to
number 9 is off notice.
Item number 9 is off notice. House Bill 2630. Item number 13, House Bill 2844. That's off notice, right? Is off notice. Item number 16, House Bill, is that rolled to the hill?
Yes.
House Bill 2215 is rolled to the hill. Item number 18, House Bill 2532 is off notice. Oh, I'm sorry. Hold on a second. That one will not be off notice. He wanted to speak on that. Right?
Yes, that's correct.
That item, I'm sorry. 18 is not off notice.
19 to the hill.
Item number 19, House Bill 591 is rolled to the hill. Is 29 next?
I see 20, Rep. Carringer asked for number 25, 2345 to the hill.
This one?
Yes.
Item number 25, House Bill 2345 will be rolled to hill. Item number 29, House Bill 2092, rolled to the hill. Also 30, I think.
Okay, yeah.
Item number 30, House Bill 2430, rolled to the hill. 31 off notice, or 31 to the hill. Item number 31, House Bill 2673, rolled to the hill. And
40, 2651, it's addendum number 1.
what about 34 is off notice, isn't it?
Oh, yes, you're right.
Item number 34, House Bill 1863 is off notice. And I believe that's it, right? I mean, the rest of it, do I need to roll mine as well? Or just help keep it there? Oh, 40 is, isn't it?
40, yeah.
And last but not least, item number 40, House Bill 2951 is rolled to the hill. What about Todd's addendum? There is a 41, isn't there?
Yeah, that would be 41.
We don't have to say anything on that. All right, I think that we've got it all covered. I apologize in advance if I missed anything there. That's going to take us to, I believe, item number 2, correct? That brings us to item number 2 by Chairman Hawk, House Bill 1939. Properly motioned. Chairman Hawk, you are recognized on House Bill 1939.
Thank you, Chairman and members. And we've had a really good discussion between our schools, our School Board Association, and the Department of Human Services as to how potential uses of TANF funds may go into our local schools. We saw some innovative things done with our summer programs and some after-school programs during our special session over the last couple of years. We're still having some discussions about this particular concept, and I think we may be able to get somewhere with. We want to see how the TISA fund goes, as well as how some of our TANF opportunity grants go as well over the next 12 months. So that being said, I'd like to take this bill off notice with the idea that we'll come back and have some further discussions, hopefully when we all get reelected. So I'd like to take it off notice, Mr. Chairman and members.
Thank you, Chairman Hawk. Without objection, House Bill 1939 is off notice. Brings us to item number 3 on the calendar, House Bill 2015 by Chairman Hawk. Properly motion, Chairman Hawk, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members, and we've all been extremely busy, and I've not been able to work this bill with the committee as I've liked, and I may do something similar with this piece of legislation, but let me give you a broad concept of this particular bill. Truancy officers in our school systems have been coming to me on a regular basis, and there's concerns about what do we do with an 18-year-old high school sophomore. And there are great concerns about that, and I don't want to project where we could be in the next 8 or 10 years, but I do have concerns about some retentions that may be occurring now. And how do we handle that as a state, as school systems? There's some constitutionality concerns about this particular legislation, but in a nutshell, this bill says that when a student begins high school at a freshman year, that the clock starts and they are obligated to 4 years of attendance, absent graduating early, going to some other type of educational setting, but getting a high school diploma or 4 years of attendance in the high school setting is where we're going with this particular piece of legislation. The idea comes from a truancy officer in Northeast Tennessee that I've worked closely with. I'm not sure what the will of the committee is. Once again, I've not been able to discuss this with members, but I'm happy to answer any questions or comments and do whatever we need to do with this legislation, whichever direction the wind blows, Chairman Haston and members.
Thank you, Chairman Hawk. Members, do you have any questions for our sponsor about the legislation? Seeing none, without objection, we'll be voting on House Bill 2015. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. They're on to full education.
Thank you, Chairman. That's the most pleasant surprise I've had all week. Thank you.
That brings us to item number 4, House Bill 2455 by Representative Hicks. Properly motion. Representative Hicks, you are recognized on House Bill 2455.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I have an amendment that makes the bill.
All right, what drafting code do you have?
012275.
Hold on one second.
Okay. I'm sorry.
sure
Yeah, I
you- I
want to
don't-
go with the bills introduced. Yeah.
Okay. There is no, you're running it as introduced, okay? Representative Hicks, you are recognized to explain your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 2455 helps address the instructor shortage for our CTE programs in our high schools. Current law says you have to have 5 years' work experience within the last 10 years. This bill adds that they can have 3 years of experience within the 5 years. Current law says you have to hold an active industry certification. The bill allows the industry certification to be used from any state. Everyone still has to meet all requirements established by the State Board of Education rules. The bill doesn't change anything about the requirements that they need to be enrolled in an educator preparation program if they haven't completed one, or they can also show proof of completion of courses in things like classroom management and the Teacher Code of Ethics. All the programs have to be approved by the State Board of Education and still have to meet all other state board requirements, like for license advancement and renewal. So I would just like to sort of explain this bill through a little bit different lens, if I could. There are probably literally thousands of folks just like me across this state that are actually aging out of the workforce. And I know it's a little scary, but we talk about it all the time. And someone like me, I have a high school diploma. I was blessed to be able to do that, and that's all I have. I didn't go to college, never intended to go to college, and really never even thought about going to college because I like the trades. And that's the path that I decided to go. I learned my trades from men just like me. That's how I learned those. And I think that folks like me, like right now, I have 41 years experience. I can take you and show you a lot of folks with that much experience in building homes. When it comes to building a home, sure, we have problems. I'm a problem solver from the time that I get up in the morning till the time that I go to bed. I enjoy that, but there's a lot of folks that's in the building industry that could be helpful in this. A lot of those folks are probably not going to want to go back to college to be able to instruct kids how to do their job that they have plenty of experience in. Someone in our field can teach morals, integrity, hard work, work ethic, problem solving, and do it all in a common sense kind of way. The students that we are talking about, and the students that we are talking about at this time in the legislature trying to help, this is the students that needs these kind of folks to be on their side and help them. It's exactly what they need. They need mentors. They need that more than anything. They need hands-on experience, and folks like what I'm talking about could help with that. I have asked the question, and this would not be necessarily a classroom setting. It would be more of a shop setting. So I feel like someone, I don't want to hinder someone like me from going this route to try to help these kids. I think it's very, very important. And this is one reason why, and it's called Opportunity Youth. And Opportunity Youth is kids students from 16 to 24 years old that are neither working nor enrolled in school. And it's 12.6 of kids in that age group that is not working or not going to school. In Memphis alone, that's 30,000 kids. That's a big number. That's our workforce. So it's obvious that we need to try something else, and I would just, I would like the idea of passing this bill forward because I think it stands for what Tennessee stands for. I really do. We got to get back to hard work and common sense, and that's sort of what this bill does. So that's explaining the bill the way that I know how, and appreciate your consideration to pass.
Thank you, Representative Hicks. We do have the department down for wanting to come forward and to testify on this bill. If it's without objection, we will go out of session and allow them to come up and regale us with their knowledge. Without objection, out of session.
Thank you, Chairman. Jack Powers at the Department of Education, and I don't know if regale is the right word, or maybe even knowledge. And want to say thank you to the sponsor for describing the personal connection that he has to this piece of legislation. Our position on this bill is a work with sponsor. We did offer an amendment, which is not the one on the bill. We certainly hear and understand the need to have flexible pathways to put occupational teachers in our classroom. And there are elements of this bill that certainly would do that. Reducing the number of years of work experience that can count and make someone eligible to receive a license is a big change. as is changing the out-of-state certifications and beginning to accept more of those are two really big changes that we believe will open the door to more occupational teachers. With that being said, this bill would allow for a pathway to become a licensed occupational teacher that does not include going to an approved occupational teacher prep program. And that's the piece that we feel is still very important. One of the things I want to touch on that this bill doesn't include, that is included in an approved occupational prep program, is pairing with an effective mentor teacher. In addition to, partnering with that mentor teacher to help you kind of learn the ropes of teaching. I want to touch just for a moment on what the current requirements of occupational teacher prep programs are. These are requirements that we believe are already flexible enough to allow for individuals to switch from their industry profession into the classroom. So UT Martin is the state's largest occupational prep program right now. And that consists of just 4 courses that can be taken virtually. I think one of the biggest differences between that program and the coursework that is named in this bill is the fact that that coursework is sequenced. You're paired with an effective mentor in the classroom while you're teaching full-time. And the coursework is really designed to build and be taken in a specific order to effectively prepare the occupational teacher to be a good teacher in the classroom. It does include as well the requirement that an occupational teacher demonstrate competency in some of those core areas of teaching, such as planning a lesson, such as effective classroom management, such as teaching students with disabilities. So while certainly it is important to have content knowledge, and these are individuals that will possess that, there are other elements of successful teaching that we believe must be maintained and are maintained through our approved occupational teacher prep programs.
Thank you for that. Does anybody have any questions for our guests? Chairman Reagan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Ms. Powers, thank you for being here. We appreciate that. A discussion in my office earlier, I questioned the paths forward for getting that experience / education and education or teaching, if you will, to those who are coming in to do this kind of work for us. And my opinion still stands. One path doesn't seem adequate. This bill appears to offer other paths. So please explain why other paths are not going to be sufficient.
Thank you for the question. I think the main reason is not the idea of having additional paths, it's what those paths contain. And what I just kind of outlined, the elements of currently approved occupational teacher prep programs, that pairing with a clinical mentor who's already a successful teacher in the district, that sequenced and really specific coursework that isn't kind of taken in a piecemeal fashion, but is designed in a way where you're building upon skills that you have learned. Those are the really important elements. One of the things that I also want to touch upon is current occupational teacher prep programs are job embedded. And that means that the educator gets their teaching license up front. So you don't have to take all of that coursework before you're allowed to enter the classroom. You are getting on-the-job training through the current occupational prep programs. And so again, you're taking that sequence coursework under the tutelage of an effective mentor who's with you in the classroom while you're teaching full-time.
Representative Love.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You listed out one of the advantages of the current programs that you have with classroom management and serving students with disabilities, correct? And I'm trying to follow. I thought that was part of what was also in the legislation from Representative Hicks. I think it's in section number 4, letter C, where it says, be enrolled in a state-approved educator preparation program with a job-embedded clinical practice, have completed a state board-approved educator preparation program, or provide proof of completion of coursework in classroom management, pedagogy, serving students with disabilities and English learners, and the teacher code of ethics is set forth in 49-55615 from a state board approved educator preparation program. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, that's in the bill.
Does that line up with what you all currently are suggesting that is a good educator prep program for occupational practitioners?
I think it's more about what, again, is offered in addition if you're going through those approved prep programs, which is pairing with that clinical mentor, the current requirement that you demonstrate competency with some of those skills, such as lesson planning, such as serving students with disabilities. If I could, I have the names of the courses at UT Martin that I can read off. And I just wanted to highlight again the fact that all of those things are kind of integrated throughout all of the courses in the way that they are sequenced. So the first course is Effective Instructional Strategies in Managing the Environment. That's where you get lesson planning and classroom management kind of concurrently. Second one is Students with Exceptionalities. That's additional content knowledge about preparing students and teaching students with disabilities. The third is Diagnosis and Evaluation, where you learn how to design tests and give tests that measure the skills that you are teaching as an occupational teacher. And then the fourth is a course on educational psychology, where again, you're learning about proper techniques for lesson planning, instructing youth, and classroom management. One of the other things I wanted to specify too, I mentioned UT Martin, and these courses are offered at UT Martin, which is our largest occupational prep program. We also have 2 school districts right now that are currently approved to train occupational teachers. So to Chairman Reagan's point about the pathways, I would say that there are, you could say, 2 pathways. There's the higher ed pathway, and then Knox and Rutherford County are currently approved to prepare occupational teachers as well.
Representative Love, follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I guess for me, maybe I'm not understanding what needs to be added. I hear what you're saying, but Section 4 says be enrolled in a state board approved educator preparation program. So my concern would be if a state board approved educator preparation program is not sufficient for a person to be an educator, we have a larger problem, if that's what you're saying.
No, sir, respectfully, not quite. That portion of the bill, I believe, is before the or, which then lists. So that is one of the options that's spelled out, is you can have completed an approved program or be enrolled in one. And then there's the or, which mentions the coursework, but does not go as far as to say complete an entire approved prep program.
So maybe the or is the issue if the or was taken out? I don't want to get you on the record, but I'm saying.
Yes, sir, the or is the issue.
I got you. Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Chairman Sapicki.
We're getting ready to go through TISA, which one could argue we probably need to work on that name, but anyway. Here's a question for you. In the funding formula, and just follow me along here for a second. In the funding formula, we are incentivizing our LEAs to get students into career technical education pathways to the point of roughly between call it a stipend or a direct payment to the LEA of $4,500 to $5,000 per student, which is almost the same amount of the basic funding of $6,860, I think it is. If we have that incentive to our LEAs, which we've all been passing bills here, and the governor is all in on CTE and dual pathways, when and if we pass TISA, these LEAs are going to hear what we're telling them about career technical, that we want these kids to be taking career technical courses to the point of almost paying them the exact same amount of what a base student would receive just for going to school. Not only are we going to need alternatives to get people into these CTE classrooms, we're going to have to be able to be very creative on how we're going to get them in there. And my colleague here from Nashville, I see the word or. And maybe this will be a question for the sponsor on the word or, but I'm struggling to find out why the department is arguing about this bill right now when the governor is proposing a funding bill of $9 billion that a good portion that's going to be career technical at the beginning. And I'm just kind of a little hypothetical here. Once the word gets out to our superintendents and our principals that we are incentivizing these students at $4,500 to $5,000 a student, what are the odds that almost every high school student in the state of Tennessee is going to be involved in career technical? That mathematical equation could be something that this General Assembly is going to have to look at. So help me understand why we're fighting about getting more qualified. Now, I understand you got some issues with the wording here, but in principle, wouldn't we be supporting this bill?
First of all, Chairman, thank you for the question, and I want to kind of reiterate what you said and say absolutely, we would like to see more students taking advantage of these courses and believe that TISA offers a path for that, as well as the governor's, some of the budget investments that the governor has proposed. As I mentioned before, the first two aspects of this bill, we do believe will widen that door and allow more folks to be qualified to serve as occupational educators. It is not a pushback that we need those flexibilities. It is just the position that it is important to maintain a requirement for what constitutes adequate preparation. And we believe that whether it be through the pathway that higher education institutions offer or the district pathway that we've already had districts take advantage of and that we hope more districts take advantage of, that those pathways exist already.
Any other questions? Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you have? Oh, no, well, we're out of session right now. Does anybody have any questions while we're out of session? All right, seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Without objection, we'll be going back into session. Chairman Sapicki, you have a question on the bill? Not a question on the bill.
I have
a question for the sponsor.
For the sponsor. So the word "or," is that a problem in the bill for you? If we made, and this is all providing we could do this, Mr. Chairman, if we just took out the word "or," is there a problem, or do you want to leave the word "or" in there? It's your bill.
Let me interject. Legal is telling me that we cannot do that.
Substantive?
Yeah.
Okay, never mind then. Then you don't have to answer
So
that.
you don't
Never
have to
mind.
answer that question.
I'll withdraw the question.
Does anybody have any questions for our sponsor on the bill? Chairman White?
Thank you, Chairman. Representative Hicks, a person of your background, 40-plus years in the construction trade, describe to me what you bring to the classroom, say an 17, 18-year-old in a CTE class on construction.
Representative Hicks?
Give me. What do you bring? I much rather have a person who's done it for 40 years than a person that may have just gone to school or a few years. But go ahead.
Representative Hicks, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We hire a lot of young folks. I mean, we really do, especially young folks that's struggling. So, I mean, one of the first things that I do is try to find their strength and try to build them up on that. I mean, that's one of the first things that you need to do with young folks is not find their weaknesses. Right now, our education system is sort of trying to just find their weaknesses and pound them on it. So, that's one of the first things that we do is find strengths, build them up on it. From there, I mean, work ethic is just a huge part of what's lacking anymore. And we really try to teach hard work and work ethic because that goes along, makes up for a lot of mistakes. It really does. If you work hard, then you get along better with people, and it makes a huge difference. So, I mean, I just try to, I would try to really get them to focus and get them very interested, because I think most people, I see it in our trade, especially when I hire young people, if you can get them interested and get them fired up about it, then all of a sudden one day the light goes off and they want to learn. That's what happens, and I think that's what can happen here. If we can get the right people involved, we're going to have to get the right people involved. Chairman Spicky said it the best. I mean, you know, we're hitting this all hands on deck. This is not going to be easy. So I think that's very important. So that's sort of where I'm coming from on this. I know it's a different lens than most people's used to, but it's where the kids need to be, I think.
Thank you.
Any other questions for our sponsor? Question has been called. Without objection, we'll be voting on House Bill 2455. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. Go to full education.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Committee.
All right, we will be turning over in the calendar a little bit. We had a scheduling conflict that we need to take care of here, so we're going to be bringing up item number 33, House Bill 2861 by Chairman Curcio. Do I have a motion? Motion and a second. Chairman Curcio, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee, and I have amendment coded 13965 I wish to move.
All right, that's what we have. Members, does make the bill?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, do I have a motion and a second on the amendment? Do I have a second? Motion and a second properly before us. Members, without objection, we'll go ahead and add this amendment to the bill since it makes the bill. Without objection, we're voting on adopting Amendment 13965. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. We are back on your bill as amended. You are recognized on House Bill 2861.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, what this bill does is it simply changes the eligibility requirement for the current already existing ESA program that we have in this state, and it changes that eligibility criterion to be a student that is zoned to attend or attends a school that is in the ASD or is zoned to attend a school in an LEA that during the 3-year period immediately preceding September 1st, 2025 or thereafter did not offer students 180 days of in-person learning for a school year due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So those two criterion would then set the eligibility for an ESA. So whether you're zoned to the ASD or if your school is not offering 180 instructional days due to COVID-19.
Members, you've heard the explanation of the bill. Does anybody have any questions? Representative Clemens, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Sponsor. What's the intent of the legislation? What are you trying to address by doing this?
Chairman Curcio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're simply trying to change the eligibility criterion. The bill that we passed a couple of years ago had a much different, much more narrow definition, and this would change that definition.
Representative Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Are you trying to address the issues that's been determined by the court system that's a problem with this legislation that currently exists?
Chairman Curcio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, if this were to address that, I think that would be kind of a, periphery, issue. We're just trying to change the criterion of who's eligible.
Oh, yeah.
Follow up, Representative Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, well, I mean, right now the posture of this case is it's still pending before the Supreme Court of Tennessee, as recently heard. There's obviously inherent issues with the legislation itself being unconstitutional for several reasons, and it seems like we're trying to clean that up and try to avoid some sort of adverse judicial determination for an inherently unconstitutional piece of legislation, the program itself being controversial by nature. So I guess, with the true intent of this legislation, it's problematic. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman Sapiki.
Thank you, Chairman Curcio. So if an LEA had to send everybody home for a snow day, this wouldn't be part of the bill, right?
Chairman Curcio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's correct. It's due to the COVID-19 pandemic.
Chairman Sapiki.
If a LEA said they're not going to go to school because they don't have enough bus drivers, this would not take effect, correct?
Chairman Curcio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, sir. It's due to the COVID-19 pandemic.
And just one more, Mr. Chairman.
Quick follow-up, Chairman Sapiki.
Thank you very much. So if an LEA didn't have enough teachers because they're sick, this would not apply?
Chairman Curcio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, sir, that's correct. It's due to the COVID-19 pandemic.
Representative Love.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. But if the teachers were sick with COVID and they couldn't go, Mr. Sponsor.
Chairman Curcio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Leader Love, all I can tell you is exactly the words we've got drafted here, and is our intent. So if they did not offer 180 days of in-person learning for a school year due to the COVID-19 pandemic.
Right, and I was just following from my colleagues questioning that if teachers were sick and could not be in the classroom because of COVID-19, and as a result, one day of in-class instruction had to be canceled, does this then trigger this bill putting that school in the posture of having students then get ESAs?
Chairman Curcio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. They would have to be closed expressly for COVID-19 pandemic.
Okay.
Representative Love.
Thank you. I do recall the vote on ESAs and the consternation that many persons were dealing with. We are going to hear a presentation soon in here on TISA, and I would hope that maybe we would hold off on some other avenues that persons may believe lead to student academic attainment until we get this new funding formula under our belts and understand. And I say that because I have been, I guess it's myself and Chairman White and another committee, Chair Lady Moody, maybe the last of the old Education Committee, where we first started, and some others too, we first started dealing with what our colleague Joe Pitts used to say, building the plane while we're flying it. And I'm concerned about adding another piece of the plane that may not particularly help the plane fly. And I would caution us as you look at this to maybe not expand. Well, we can't expand because we're not doing it now, I guess. So maybe not add to our consternation this session. I know your intent is to try to help out some students, so I understand that, but I think it's going to be a difficult lift for us to deal with the ESAs, particularly when we have discovered that the ASD is not really doing what it was supposed to do. And many of our schools were able to help themselves turn around outside the ASD. And so for those reasons, I have concerns about this bill. Thank you for listening.
Any follow-up? Chairman Curcio, do you have anything else to say to that?
No, sir.
Okay.
Just that I know you and I had spoken about whether or not this would have an impact on the funding, and I think we've got a determination that this is outside of that discussion. So doesn't seem like there's a need to table it until after that discussion.
Chairman Reagan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm concerned about my colleague on the end of the dais down here's constitutional issues. So could you please explain how your bill avoids any constitutional infringements, especially in light of the fact that obviously the case that he mentioned is in fact in court, has not been decided, but there was enough question for it to go to the court. So please explain how your bill is going to miss that problem.
Chairman Curcio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Happy to. Thank you for asking. So it's my understanding the discussions about the current ESA program, if it is ruled to be unconstitutional, as you pointed out, they haven't made that determination yet, one way or the other, would be, the speculation would be that it's because it violates the home rule provision, because it only applied to communities. This, by making this apply to, 180 instructional days and the ASD, then it would not violate that home rule provision of the Constitution, is our understanding.
Chairman Sapicki, I'm sorry, Chairman Reagan, did you have a follow-up? Chairman Sapicki? Question has been called. See 2 objections. Do I have a third? All right. All right, question has been called. We will be voting on House Bill 2861 without, well, we've already checked with the objections. We only have 2. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. No. We'll be doing a roll call vote on this. Madam Clerk, please take the roll.
Representative Carringer. Aye. Representative Cassada. Chairman Sapicki. Aye. Representative Clemens.
No.
Representative Hurt. No. Representative Love.
No.
Chairman Reagan.
No.
Chairman White.
Aye.
Chairman Haston.
No.
Speaker Sexton. Chairman, you have 4 ayes and 5 noes.
Thank you for your work on this. Bill fails for lack of majority vote.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, committee.
That takes us to item Item number 5, House Bill 2564 by Representative Hakeem. Do I have a motion? Motion. Properly motion. Representative Hakeem, you are recognized on House Bill 2564.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. House Bill 2564 deals with corporal punishment, and previously in our state legislature, we passed legislation that prohibits corporal punishment for children with disabilities. But still, children who are considered, well, non-disabilities can be paddled in our school system. Research has shown that corporal punishment does damage to children, and that students who, I guess for the most part, are subject to this has been poor and disadvantaged students. Many children may act out, are suffering from trauma other than, who have adverse experiences at home. Allowing teachers and administrators to hit a child with trauma, suffering from trauma, is considered harmful. Again, this practice, many believe, is outdated and should not be in our school system. We know that many boards have a policy allowing corporal punishment, but don't utilize it when disciplining students. Some communities have banned, school boards have banned the practice, but there are community members who want to see it stay in place. There are legal concerns about using corporal punishment, and I guess another question is potential liabilities that schools, LEAs, or school systems can be exposed to. For these kinds of reasons, Mr. Chairman and members, we ask that we move forward with this bill that would eliminate corporal punishment.
Thank you, Representative Hakeem. Does anybody have any questions for our sponsor? Chairman Reagan.
Thank you, and Representative Hakeem, thank you for bringing this bill. It's very interesting. However, my question is not so much on what you talked about in the bill. Rather, my question is on why do you want to take that power, that authority, that decision-making away from the locals? It seems to me that this is, as you pointed out, something that they can decide for themselves. We don't need to decide it up here. So what is your response?
Representative Hakeem.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think if we look at it from the point of view of liability, I use that term, some children can be paddled in such a manner that it could create liabilities for the school system. When we look at children who come to school traumatized anyway, and then they are exposed to being paddled, this exacerbates whatever problem they may have. So these are the kind of concerns that I think we need to take in consideration.
Chairman Reagan.
Thank you. Again, I appreciate your comments, and I don't necessarily disagree.
Yes, sir.
But my point is that the decision-making that is present in the local level, they're the ones that are responsible for the liability issues. They're also the ones closest to the people in that school district, and would seem to me that they should be trusted, if you will, to make that decision. While I don't argue with anything you say, I must point out that it's still something that is present for our local school boards to decide. I'm struggling again to see why you think we need to make that decision.
Well, I guess to be consistent is I guess we say a patchwork across the state where some it's on the books but not being used, and then there are others where it's more so where parents have said to boards that they don't want to take it away. Well, is that, I guess, enough meaning to take it away from local hands? I don't know if any liability could be held for the state in a situation like this, but in an effort to be consistent.
Chairman Sapiki.
So just to kind of reflect off what my colleague has said here, the local control issue is things that we argue about all the time up here.
Yeah.
The people that sit on your school board back home are duly elected by the people that should consider, like you said, the scientific measures of this and whether or not it works, whether it doesn't work. There's probably evidence across the state of Tennessee of districts that do this and have incidences of their discipline issues in their classrooms drop dramatically. You do bring up a great point about the child that comes from a home that may be causing ACEs and issues in that manner. But one of the number one reasons right now that we talk to teachers across the state of the reason why they're getting out of the profession is the lack of discipline in the classrooms. That's what teachers are telling us. And so whether this is going to be a tool of the districts on whether or not they determine they're going to use this, I still think we should err on the side of caution with making it a state mandate where we trust our local school boards to do what they believe is best for their students. So you can respond if you want to. You don't have to. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right.
Any other questions for our sponsor? Seeing none, we'll be voting on House Bill 2564. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. No. The noes prevail. Sorry.
Thank you,
for
Mr.
your work on the
Chairman
bill.
and members.
Item number 6, House Bill 54 has been rolled to the Hill. 7 we've already taken care of. That brings us to item number 8, House Bill 2633 by Representative Cochran.
Scott.
Properly motioned. We have an untimely filed amendment here. All right. Representative Cochran, you are recognized on House Bill 2633, and I do believe we might have an untimely filed amendment. Is that correct?
We do, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Do I have a motion to consider? All right. We'll be voting to hear the untimely filed amendment. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. All right. The ayes have it. Does it make the bill?
Yes, sir, Mr.
All
Chairman.
right. Without objection, members, what's the drafting code? What drafting code do you have?
It is 014925.
Is that what we've got? All right. Do I have a motion and a second? Second. All right. Properly motioned. We'll be voting to adopt Amendment 014925. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. The ayes have it. We are back on your bill as amended. You're recognized on House Bill 2633.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And essentially what this bill does is provide some clarity in Tennessee code in reference to pronouns, and essentially saying that if a teacher or a school or school system says that it is their policy to identify students based on their biological sex, and so basically the records that they have, the birth records that they have at the central office, if it's their policy to refer to them based on that, based on those pronouns, that there can be no adverse effect taken on the teacher, so there can be no adverse disciplinary action, and then there can be no adverse civil liability on the school or the school system. Again, does not force them to adopt that policy, but if a school system adopts that policy to say we're gonna go based on biological sex, there can be no adverse effects, and that is the legislation.
Members, do you have any questions for our sponsor? Question on the bill. Question has been called. Oh, I'm sorry. We had testimony down for this. If you. Okay, withdraw question. Thank you for that. We will, without objection, we did have somebody that was down for testimony and did it through the proper manner here. So without objection, we'll be going out of session. And I believe it's Henry Seaton. Is that correct? Just come on up. Just make sure you say your name for the record and who you're with, and you'll have 3 minutes for remarks, and then we'll open it up for any questions if there are any.
Awesome.
Welcome, and go ahead. Make sure the red light's on there.
Yeah, is this good?
Yeah.
Awesome. My name is Henry Seaton, and I am the transgender justice advocate for the ACLU of Tennessee. Thank you for having me here today. I really appreciate it. So, we all believe that K-12 education is a crucial place for children to grow into who they are, gather knowledge and experience, and gain skills to enter into adult life. HB 2633, though, puts all of those things in jeopardy for potentially thousands of students across the state. I would know I was one of those students. I came out as transgender the summer between my sophomore and junior years of high school using he, him pronouns. Pronouns are what we use to refer to someone without using their name, and using the correct pronoun shows a sign of respect and recognition of someone's humanity. Once I came out, it was like my stellar academic record and love for learning were thrown out the window. I couldn't really trust anyone, much less teachers. My junior year, I had a couple of teachers I felt comfortable with, but mostly all I heard was teachers talking to classes I wasn't in about how disgusting it was for me to transition. During my senior year, though, this behavior hit its peak. One night, my mom got a call from my economics teacher around 9 p.m. saying that she would never use my correct name or pronouns and disrespecting my mom for making the choice to love and affirm me. When I asked my mom about this the other day, she said, quote, "I was shocked, hurt, upset, mad. I cried afterwards because I was so terribly hurt. I haven't forgotten about it, and I never will." The next day, the same teacher told me that if I expected to be respected, then I just shouldn't come to her class, so I didn't, and I ended that class with a 32. My childhood friend reflected on watching me go through this, saying, "Henry scarcely made it to class, and if he did, he wasn't his usual perky self." The heavy negative atmosphere made it really impossible for my friend to enjoy his life, much less partake in his education. It's a feeling I hope no one here ever has to experience. If any of the committee members are interested in talking to my mom, she's offered her email, so please see me after this. Fortunately, my school gave me the option to take the online version of the course, and I got the highest grade the proctor had ever seen someone get. Because of this incident piled onto the teachers who had no intention of respecting me, I missed 52 days of my senior year of high school, 2 months of what should have been one of the best years of my life. My narrative is not unique, and this kind of disrespect happens everywhere. If HB 2633 were to pass, we'd be condemning kids across the state to the same type of treatment I unjustly received. This can ruin a kid's potential for success post-high school. Any teacher that would behave like this to a student outside of this context would be robustly reprimanded for jeopardizing a student's safety. Trans students should not be the exception. HB 2633 encourages a dangerous and cruel learning environment for students across the state. I urge you not to let the quality of our education go down just because someone is different, and vote no on HB 2633. Thank you. And I'm honored to take any questions that may come up.
Thank you for your time today. Does anybody have any questions or comments for our guest? Chairman Watt.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, let me weigh in. I know I got to know Henry about 6 years ago, maybe, right, Henry?
I think it was around like 5 years ago, yeah.
Yeah. And issues like this, and I'm try to be fair to everyone. I understand the gist of the bill and understand what you're saying. So trying to get a balancing act here, respect for everyone. The bill says, basically, and correct me if I'm wrong, it insulates a teacher or other employee of public schools from civil liability or adverse employment action should they, as their belief, not use that pronoun. So help me with that. You know, I want to respect you and what you're saying, but also, you know, if a teacher, as far as insulates a teacher from losing their job, can you help me there?
Yeah, of course.
You're recognized.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Chairman. I think, obviously, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't want this to come off as like a legal argument by any means. But from what I understand about this bill, and I haven't gotten the chance to see the untimely filed amendment, this does not insulate or protect teachers that do wish to affirm trans students either. So it's like a one-sided argument almost. Basically, this is protecting teachers who choose to disrespect trans students, but not teachers who choose to respect trans students, even if that is in adherence with their school's policy and they could receive adverse reactions still. And then along with that, from what I understand, and for me personally, I don't feel like my teacher, in my experience, has the right to politicize me, has the right to politicize a child. And that's exactly what was happening in my life. So I hope that answers your question.
Chairman White, follow up?
Yeah, it does, and I would agree with you that teacher handled it totally wrong. I used to be a teacher, and I would treat all my students with respect. It's just that it's just tough to get this balancing act where, you know, where we, first of all, we need to respect each other no matter who we are. And, but when you have a bill such as like this, we live in a day and time where some, you know, both sides push the envelope. And then you have the pushback, such as this. All I can say is that I hate that you had to go through that experience. And I didn't have an experience like that, but I had teachers that embarrassed me, and I'd go home and in third grade, and I'd feel bad, you know. But I'm just trying to understand, because I want to respect what you're saying, but I also want to protect, you know, someone that acts right with respect, but may not prefer to use the pronoun.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, and again, thank you for that line of questioning. I think it's nice to have this open dialogue about it. For me, I never had any sort of behavioral impetus put on me in school. I never got detention. I got one demerit in the 6th grade one time because I talked, and I remember it very clearly. But that's how stellar my academic record was, right? Like, I was a great student. I really loved learning. And I just loved being in school. I loved participating in clubs and extracurricular activities. But this experience and ones like it completely robbed me of that right to have those experiences, right? So I think just like I was a respectful student, and I never did. If I remember correctly, I didn't do a single thing that was against the rule. Maybe I put up a poster on the wrong wall once, but that's about it. So this like repertoire of respect is crucial to me as well, and I appreciate you bringing it up. But I think, like I said before, using the correct pronouns for a child is how we do show that respect. Even if it's in disagreement, it is a recognition of someone's humanity in my mind. Like, we don't misgender some people that we fundamentally disagree with, but we still use their correct pronoun, right? It's a recognition of their humanity. We don't do that to literally criminals. We still use their correct pronouns. However, trans people just shouldn't be the exception to that level of respect that we give to pretty much anyone.
Chairman Watt.
Yeah, how do you teach love? By the way, committee, Henry graduated from the University of Colorado with magna cum laude this past year, and he moved back to Tennessee. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Representative Clemens?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Henry, thank you for being here. Appreciate your courage and your willingness to advocate on behalf of yourself and others. Can you elaborate a little bit on what type of mental or emotional impact your teachers had on you when I think we agree they didn't handle the situation correctly?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I would love to. Thank you for that question. I think I have some statistics about like the trans community as a whole that I think reflect my experience pretty well. I'm going to move this down because I'm too short. So in 2015, 40% of trans people reported a suicide attempt, and 92% of those people were under the age of 25. So I think just like showing that like that time of education, like that age of like high school and post high school is crucial for someone to really be who they are and to lean into who they are and what they believe and who they love. And I was not the exception to that kind of ideation by any means. So, and almost 1/3 of all LGBTQ students drop out of high school compared to the national average of about 8%. And I watched many of my peers drop out of high school as well because they were watching me be so disrespected. So these were students that weren't out as trans but knew that they were transgender that ended up dropping out because of watching me go through my experience. 78% of students in Tennessee heard negative remarks about trans people in school by either their peers or their teachers. For me personally, I received 2 death threats for being transgender by my peers in high school. So that's something that really impacted me as well. But I think when it comes to my teachers specifically, the fact that they weren't even willing to intervene when I was getting my life threatened just showed me that I wasn't valued in the classroom, that like all of the work that I had put in, all of the curriculars that I was a part of, all of the honors classes, the AP courses that I had taken were just like thrown to the water. And like Chairman White said, when I did get affirmed in school when I went to college, I graduated cum laude, and I was a part of 8 organizations in school, including our leadership program. I was in the Theta Chi fraternity. I was the director of health and safety for the Interfraternity Council. I volunteered at a local high school to teach about higher education, and among other things. So I think we can really see the difference between me not even being able to show up for 2 months of school versus me graduating cum laude.
Thank you. Representative Clemens, quick follow-up.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to thank you. I can't imagine, those of us who were bullied, I think some of us were probably bullied or, at some point in high school, because that's what, happens when you're a teenager and you don't know who you are. You're figuring your own self out, much less anybody else. And it's a very, it's a difficult time. And so I can't even, I guess I can't even conceive what it must have been like for someone in your position, compared to what you went through. And I just know how hard it is for anyone else. So thank you for your courage, and thank you for the issues on what you're advocating today. Appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you for time, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
Without objection, we'll be going back into session. We are back on item number 8, House Bill 2633. Question has been called without objection. We have 1, 2. We will be voting on House Bill 2633. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed say no.
No.
The ayes have it. House Bill 2633 goes on to full education. If you wish to record it as a no, please let the clerk know. All right, I'm just going to let the audience know we've got to get back to item number 1 and our presentation of the Department of Education. So we are going to try, because I think we can get through real quickly, hopefully through 10, 11, and 12. If you're past 10, 11, or 12, I am sorry, but we're running up against the clock, and we still have to get back to item number 1. House Bill 2021, item number 10, by Chair Lady Littleton.
Motion.
We have a motion and a second. Chair Lady Littleton, you are recognized on House Bill 2021.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And this bill comes from the Dixon County Leadership Team. They've brought several bills to me in the past, and I've worked really well with them. And all this bill does is expand from the teachers to all the school personnel the requirement to complete the child abuse training program during annual in-service training.
Thank you for that. Members, we do have an untimely filed amendment that will clean up just a little bit of language. It doesn't do anything to the nature of the bill, but it is Amendment 15251. It is untimely. Do I have a motion to consider?
Motion, second.
What? Oh. Sorry. Chairman White, it's my amendment. Sorry.
I'm sorry. Okay, committee, we're now on the amendment. Let me turn my mic on.
Motion to consider.
We have a motion to consider the amendment before us. The amendment number is 15251. All those in favor of adding the amendment to your bill?
Consider first. Consider it. You guys consider it first.
Okay, we're going to consider it first. All those who want to consider, say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. We're now back on adding the amendment. Do I have a motion and a second?
Motion to amendment.
Okay, we have that. All those in favor of adding the amendment to the bill, which is 2377.
Let me briefly explain it real quick before we do that. All it does is it deletes other school personnel and substitutes employees working directly with students of the respective LEA or public charter school. It's just clarifying language. It doesn't change the bill. That's it.
Okay, members, with that explanation,
Question on the amendment.
question's been called. Any objection to the question? Hearing none, all those in favor of adding the amendment to the bill, indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. We're now back on your bill as properly amended. We're now, Chair Lady Littleton.
Again, this come to me from the youth leadership in Dixon County. I'm so very proud of them, and I think this will help with the child abuse inside the schools, to be detected inside the schools.
Question's been called. Without objection, we'll be voting on House Bill 2021. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. Ayes have it. On to full education.
Thank you.
That brings us to item 2377 by Chair Lady Littleton. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Motion is second. Chair Lady, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This creates the Job Training for High School Students Act. It requires the Department of Education to establish and implement a pilot program that addresses the state's unemployment rate and the state's high school dropout rate by enabling students enrolled in the high school to achieve academic, career, personal, and social success.
All right, thank you for that. Chairman Sapicki, you are recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Little, for bringing this. It's a very interesting topic you bring up here. Trying to correlate the two, unemployment rate with the dropout rate. I was wondering, I would like to make a motion to send us to summer study for one reason, is to gather more information on this, because I think we're onto something here. And I think we could bring OREA in on this also. I think we can get the pertinent information to maybe come back next year and have not a study, but actually have a bill to address this. So I make a motion for summer study.
Second. Without objection, we will be voting to send House Bill 2377 to summer study. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. House Bill 2377 is sent to summer study. Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. Chair Lady Littleton, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. I think this is a great idea too. We had summer study last year and we didn't go very far with it. So this was kind of something that we thought would clean it up. And we have some other things I think to discuss with summer study. So thank you for that.
Thank you for your work on this.
Thank you.
All right, that brings us to the item number 12 before we go to item number 1, House Bill 1930.
Second.
Properly motion. Representative Cooper, thank you for your patience today. You are recognized on House Bill 1930.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. House Bill 1930 authorizes the School Board of Education or charter school governing body to implement the ticket program as part of a school's discipline policy. The fiscal note has no significance. And the ticket program is part of the community of schools. It was passed some years ago, about 5 or 6 years ago. And I tell you, that this program has been used in some of the school systems, schools in Nashville and in Memphis. And to give you an idea of the ticket program, just imagine that you have a clipboard with your names of your students on one side and about 100 infractions that a child may do in a classroom during the day. And I just thought it was very, very unique, because I know when I have one child in there that's cutting up, as I said, running me crazy, and you may have 2 or 3, that when you go to the office or something, or send them to the office or somewhere for some discipline, and then the principal comes down and says, well, what was he doing? You are so engaged in your teaching and with what's going on in the classroom, you say, oh, he's throwing paper in the garbage can, or he's doing. Well, this ticket program allows you to, as you're teaching, I found was very unique, because if a child, and especially just some that you can identify as always doing something, all you have to do is take your pen and check that infraction, or whatever it is, and keep on teaching. That child already knows and has been explained, or the children have been explained to what it's about. It brings the parents in after about 5 checks. I've forgotten the number, and the parent is involved all the way in almost initially about what that child is doing in the classroom all day long, not learning and not doing what it's supposed to do. Now, it protects the teacher, because the teacher, as I just said earlier, can't remember all these little things that the child does a day to disrupt the classroom. So it protects and provides teachers with specific behavior types that identify why students are removed from the classroom. Then it also allows parents to participate and understand clearly why students are being removed by early involvement of the parents. And 3, it ensures students have the opportunity to correct behavior before classroom removal. And I would, if there are any questions, I would entertain them now. I just think it's something that could be used for teachers, but now we have a disciplinary ways that the state has passed and is in law. But the teachers are complaining that it's so long, it takes them 2 or 3 hours to fill out those applications, and it gives them an opportunity to put something down there that maybe the child didn't do, or maybe they have to fill it out, but they can't recall everything all the time. So I just thought this was a way to kind of add on to what the teacher would need to help them and to protect them when they're removing a student from a classroom. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Representative Cooper. Does anybody have any questions for our sponsor?
Question on the bill.
Question has been called. Without objection, we'll be voting on House Bill 1930. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You're on to full education.
Thank you,
Thank you
Mr.
very
Chair
much.
and members.
Members, that'll take us to item number 1, House Bill 2143. Do I have a motion and a second?
Do we want a motion? Yes?
Yeah, got it.
Motion? Second.
Properly motion. Chairman White, you are recognized on House Bill 2143.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee, and I won't take much of the committee's time. I know we're pushing the clock, and we have the commissioner here. We'll let her address most of the issues. I would just like to say a few introductory comments. We've all been anxious over the last number of weeks and months to hear what exactly is coming out. And I can say, as someone who's been on the Education Committee for 9 years, that I'm very excited. Every year that I'm on the committee, I hear about issues with the BEP formula, and now we have an opportunity to really look at something. As I spent the weekend, I stayed up here all weekend and studied the bill and looked at it. I really think we have something that we can really get behind. We may need to tweak a few things going forward, but basically we have the opportunity to rewrite how we fund K-12 education. And what I do like is it's got 3 priorities. It empowers each student to read by the 3rd grade. Secondly, prepares each high school graduate to succeed in higher education or career or of the graduate's choice. And it provides each student with the resources to succeed regardless of the student's individual circumstances. And the best thing I like about it is, instead of 47, 46 metrics that we have in the BEP, it's really 4 elements of funding: the base, the student weights, the direct funding, and the outcome funding are really the four ways, and we have categories under that. It's very simple, in my opinion, and this will put money into schools. We're not always talking about every year, well, can we find another $40 million to bring our nursing ratio down from 3,000 to 750? My opinion, it will eliminate a lot of that. Plus, it gives a lot of accountability. If you are funding based upon the needs of each child in that school, then we know where the money goes. And then we can hold our districts, our schools, and our leadership accountable for how they use that money. So I think we are on to something that we really can get behind. And so with having said that, I would like to, we can now go out of session and invite the commissioner to come up.
Members, without objection, we will go out of session and invite the department to come up to give a brief presentation and answer any questions we might have today. We are out of session. Come on up and just state your name from the department and from the administration. Just state your name and who you represent.
Good evening, Penny Schwinn, Commissioner of Education, great state of Tennessee.
Good evening, Brett Easley, Legislative Director for the Governor.
Sam Piercy, Deputy Commissioner.
Go right ahead.
Okay, thank you, sir. So happy to be here this evening to talk about the proposed Tennessee investment in student achievement. I know that many of you have seen this presentation before, and so I will just focus on some of the key parts. Obviously, there's been 3 decades of discussion related to how to do funding reform, and certainly think about strategic ways to increase investments in public education. In terms of some of the key takeaways in what this proposed formula is designed to do, the chairman said it best, but it is really focused on 3rd grade reading proficiency, empowering all of our high school students to be successful after they graduate, and ensuring that every child is provided with the resources he or she needs, regardless of where they live. In terms of how the formula works, there are 4 components. The first is the base. That is what covers the essentials of an education. So it is the things that every child will need regardless of where they live. The weights are the additional components, that is the base times a percentage for those things that are specific or unique to individual students, and we will talk a little bit about those. Direct funding are direct dollar amounts allocated for specific programmatic priorities as determined by the General Assembly. In this proposal, it is focusing on early literacy and high school CTE. In terms of, it looks like that didn't come up. In terms of the actual proposal itself, there are a couple of different components when we break that down. So right now what we have is a base, which is $6,860. That is, every student would generate that amount. When we looked at what should go into the base, here is how that is calculated. We took what is currently funded under the BEP, and there are a few sections of those 46 components, which ends up being over 125 lines of different requirements depending on what students are eligible for. And we said, let's make sure that CTE is funded in direct. We took the 3 areas that are currently in the BEP related to at-risk, special education, and ESL, or English learners, and we put that in the weights. Everything else went into the base. That ends up being approximately $6.5 billion. It is slightly less than that. And the addition that you see, which is that $6.6 billion, is the additional funding that goes to support nurses, counselors, some for RTI. So that is that actual dollar for dollar difference. $6,860 is the base. When you get into the weights, there are 4 categories of weights. The first is economically disadvantaged. That's a 25% weight. Then you get to concentration of poverty, which is for those students who are in Title I eligible schools, and that's 5%. You look at sparse, which is 25 students per square mile, and small, which is any district that is 1,000 students or fewer. Both of those are 5% weights. And then you look at charter schools, and that is taking the charter school facility fund and moving it from outside of the BEP or the formula into a new formula. That is at 4%. Unique learning needs are those that are specific to students related to students with disabilities, English learners, characteristics of dyslexia, and students who are gifted, which in Tennessee also falls under those that have an IEP for being gifted. You move into direct funding, $500 for every K-3 student for literacy, $500 for those students who require tutoring in 4th grade, and then an average of $5,000 for CTE programs. Currently, under the BEP, the average is $4,500. This does increase that to an average of $5,000. And the post-secondary assessment is the ACT and the ACT retake. What you see here are 2 different students, and it's to give you an idea of how the formula works. So on the website, we have a calculator. Every district has received something that looks somewhat like this. It is just multiplication across a table. So if you're looking at the base, it is 6860 times the number of kids in your district, or your ADM, your average daily membership. That's how much you get for the base. If you are looking at a weight, it is 6860 times 25% for economically disadvantaged times the number of kids who are economically disadvantaged in your district. That's how much you get. It is a series of a few lines of multiplication. You add up that final column, and that's the total that you would receive or generate under the new formula. Some additional funding components that I want to make sure to highlight in this, and we can go through any of these examples. Fast growing. Fast growing is still an additional amount of money on top that districts would be eligible for. That funding amount is increased in this proposal to include not just the per pupil for fast-growing districts, but also a facility or infrastructure stipend for those districts that have seen consistent funding increases over time. The second part is on supporting teachers and the teacher salary component. Currently, for next fiscal year, the governor has proposed an investment of $125 million. That would still go into the instructional component of the BEP. Moving forward, the General Assembly, if you decide and determine to increase teacher salaries in the way you've done before, for example, if you put $100 million into a new formula, that would generate, one, those dollars going to existing educators' salaries, so it ensures that it goes to their salaries. And number 2 is it requires the State Board of Education to raise the minimum salary level so that you have that recurring fund forevermore. The other thing that I just want to say based on feedback and looking at the budget, salary equity is now also included. We will make sure that that continues in terms of that particular programmatic expense. Local contribution and fiscal capacity has been another big conversation. And what I want to do is to separate a formula and fiscal capacity. Every state applies fiscal capacity. It is just part of what you do, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Whether it is the BEP or it is this TISA proposal, there's fiscal capacity applied. Broadly speaking, fiscal capacity is not every district pays 30% of any formula. Under the BEP, you have 3 different ratios that you're using or divisions that you're using: 75-25, 70-30, and 50-50, depending on which of the 46 elements it's being applied to. Under TISA, you have 1. It is just 70-30. 70% of the formula related to the base and the weights is paid for by the state. 30% is paid for by all the districts together. So I want to walk through that a little bit. When you're talking about fiscal capacity and that local contribution and local share, in any formula, it is the percent that all the districts together are responsible for. We assess that at the county level in Tennessee. So in this proposal, similar to the BEP, 30% of the base and the weights is the responsibility of all the counties together. You think about that like going out to dinner and it's your bill at the end. When you look at the local contribution, that is the amount that each of you at the dinner table actually pays into it. When we're talking about fiscal capacity, the difference is that is saying, depending on how much everyone makes, maybe the chairman pays a little bit more and this chairman pays a little bit less. That is fiscal capacity. Not every district puts in 30%. Some districts will put in 10. Some will put in 60, and that is about the calculation of fiscal capacity. Again, the 30%, which is that bill you get at the end of your meal, all the counties together have to contribute to. How much of that bill each county is responsible for is considered fiscal capacity. That is applied under the BEP. That is also applied under TISA. What you would all need to discuss and decide, and certainly the department from this perspective is agnostic to this because it's the 70-30 split, is whether you take the feedback, and the feedback that we have heard from the public has been one calculation. Right now we use two. We use TASER and CBER together. So we heard a lot of feedback about going to one. And we looked at best practice. So what do other states who have no income tax do? Most other states, those who don't have income tax, as well as those states who have moved to a student-based model, and that's 39 states have already moved to this model. This is a tried and true, well-tested across all parts of the country model. Most of them have used what is considered the simple calculation, which is CBER. The department used both the desire to have one calculation and the best practice that we've seen when looking at other states to go to that simple calculation, which is the CBER model. But again, in terms of how much money the formula generates, that doesn't change based on fiscal capacity. It is still the same overall number. It's just how the local share component of 30% gets divided up amongst the districts in terms of their bill at the end. So that is just to give you an overview of the fiscal capacity component. Again, different than the formula. Formula generates the amount that students get. Fiscal capacity determines how much the adults have to pay into the formula. In terms of improving transparency and accountability, this has academic goals that are set by school boards, having that tied to how money is allocated. So we want to ensure that if a board is approving a budget, that is aligned to the academic goals they have for students. For districts in public charter schools, an LEA or public charter school with a D or F may be asked to present to an ad hoc education finance committee to discuss funding and outcomes. The results of that hearing can lead to no action or one of two actions. Again, I know there have been a lot of conversations about this. Certainly interested and open to having that conversation and discussion in terms of this particular component. In terms of reporting, currently there is a federal requirement under ESSA for every school and district in the country to have school-level expenditure data reported annually on a report card. That means that every school and every district should be able to say this is exactly what money we're spending and on what categories for what purposes. Currently under the BEP, because it is a district level, right? So we're taking averages and ratios at the district level, and that is how we generate funding. It is very difficult to break that down to a school level expenditure. It is federally required. We do have to start doing that this year regardless. This will allow for more transparent reporting and ease of reporting. The other thing I want to make sure to clarify is that there are no additional data elements that need to be collected. This is all data that is already required to be submitted accurately and attested to by districts every single year. The disbursement of funds would continue to happen on the schedule that it happens now. We disperse funds 10 times per year. We would continue to disperse funds 10 times per year. So those are some of those reporting and accountability elements that I just want to make sure to highlight. And then finally, with professional development, professional development will be provided by the department. We've heard lots of really good productive feedback about content related to requirements and assessments and things like that. So I just want to note that. You will see that it says professional development will be offered. I'm certainly happy to engage in that conversation as well. But we do want to make sure, and we've heard frankly from the finance staff of our districts, that really wanting to make sure they understand the formula, they understand what the data requirements are. And one of the things that I think has been the biggest piece of feedback in terms of questions around professional development is how important the data is in terms of the dollars that are generated for districts, a very clear connection to that. And it is much easier to see that when it's at the student level versus a large district or a small district or a medium district where it all gets aggregated together. And then secondly, how that data generates the funding and what that funding is applied towards. All of that would be very clear in data collection, professional development offered for districts to make sure they know what data they're submitting and they know how to maximize the funds for the students they are actively serving. I'm happy to answer any questions that you all may have, of course.
Members, any questions for our guests? I'm sure that there's a few. Chairman Sapicki, you're batting lead off.
All right. So, staying at the macro level, 30,000 feet, we got plenty of time to get into the weeds on this thing. You made a statement about the 39 states, is it?
Yes, sir.
Could you get a report back to this committee of in the top 10 in the country, you pick the category you want, don't care what it is, what states rank in the top 10 that do this formula? Because that's kind of a why behind we're doing this, because if it's a best practice, then hopefully the proof would be in the pudding with the top 10 in the country in education are already doing this funding formula. So now we have a basis of what we're striving for. Make sense?
I can
got it?
answer that now.
Go ahead.
Okay. So if you look at the top 10 ranked states in terms of performance, I can either do that based on reading or math. I don't know what your preference is.
They're both important.
Yeah, I will agree. Interestingly enough, they're not necessarily the same states. For example, you've got Mississippi that's in the middle of the pack in reading and then at the bottom of the pack in math. So I will use on average the highest performing states. So you look at New Jersey, which is a yes. You look at Massachusetts, which is almost first in everything. Minnesota, Virginia, turning over. Indiana is consistently in the top 15. Utah, Idaho, Florida only in reading, middle of the pack in math. So we are happy to make sure to verify, but the vast majority of those states all use this formula. Not this formula, but a student-based formula, excuse me, just to be clear.
Chairman Sabiki.
Out of that list, it's kind of diverse there a little bit. Do you know anecdotally, have some of these shifted recently, or have they shifted and it's been a long path forward? Have you, from your colleagues, have you seen a quick turnaround in the classroom? We are funding the classrooms differently, but the reason why we're funding the classrooms differently is to get a different outcome.
Yes, sir.
So, and if you don't have the answer, that's fine today, because I'm trying to stay at the macro level here. But if you could get us data on what something like this looks like for the state of Tennessee from the department's view of what we can start to project, knowing what we're asking of our LEAs of trying to get to. I would love for somebody in another state to read that list and have Tennessee in there. So
I would agree.
if you could just start, and just what you think of how we're going to get there, and is this going to be something that's going to be a 3-4 years before we start to see the ball move, or is this something that we're going to see, like we did with literacy, the bills and literacy, start to see this turn around very quickly?
Sure. So what I'll do to follow up is I'll make sure to give those states that have been doing this the longest, I think, and just how long you saw in terms of when they changed their formula, the increase, and then when they started to see achievement changes. I will give, there's 2 states on this list who have had this in place for over a decade, where I'm more familiar with what's happened in terms of their specific adjustments. What I have seen in other states is that typically takes 2 to 3 years in terms of you are making the financial shift in practices, if you are funding differently or adding resources to areas that you need the most, and then you start to see those increases build up over time, and then you have a tipping point. And that's when you see a lot of these states have been kind of in the middle, just below middle, and have moved up to that top 10, top 15. Many of them, and I'll give Indiana as an example, is a state that's been, they've had their formula for a while. They are looking to make a shift in their formula now, but they are consistently in the top 15. They are the most demographically similar to Tennessee. And so that's one that we spend a lot of time looking at. States that have just made the shift to this are Maryland and Texas, 2 very different states, so I couldn't speak to what that might do for their student achievement numbers.
Last one, Mr. Chairman, if you don't
Chairman
mind.
Sapiki.
And so your department and the subcommittees across the whole state have been working on this for 6 months, 7 months-ish. And this bill has just rolled across our desk for 2 weeks. So all I'm asking is try to answer every question we have, because we have to get very comfortable with this. This is a bill we're not going to take up every year. That's right. And so I would just hope that we are in the mindset of let's make sure we get it right for Tennessee instead of how fast we can get it done for Tennessee, okay? That's all I'm going to say. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Love, you're batting second.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You made comments about fiscal capacity. Much of the consternation I think people have is when you say 70-30%. and the messaging is 70-30, except when you come testify, then clarity is given that it's not 70-30 in the sense of every county or LEA will get 70-30 treatment, but that counties will contribute to that 30%. With that being, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just want to clarify, it is not different than now in terms of what that means.
Oh,
That
I
is-
understand.
Yeah.
But the rollout of this new funding was everything's new. It's brand new, shiny situation. More money. We're going to address some issues with funding. Schools will get more money, some counties. And so, like, what county or counties are paying the larger percent of that 30%, if you have that information?
Yes, I do. And are you looking at under TISA or under the Tasser-Sieber combination?
TISA.
Okay. So that would be just looking at the Sieber model. So if I am looking at the ones with the highest percent, that is going to be Davidson County, Hamilton County, Shelby County, Williamson County. Those would be the top 5.
What percent is Davidson County?
Davidson County is 17.99.
And Hamilton?
Hamilton is at 5.99. Oh, Knox, excuse me. Knox is at 7.69. Shelby is at 12.06. And Williamson's at 6.21.
Okay, so Davidson 17.99.
Yes.
All right. Mr. Chairman, if I could, just a few more questions.
I'm sorry, sir. Can I clarification point?
Sure.
Davidson's 17.99 under Sieber. It's 17.39 under Tasser.
Okay.
So there's not a meaningful difference between those two models.
Okay. You mentioned in your presentation also Education Ad Hoc Finance Committee for schools that may end up with a D or an F.
Yes, sir.
Can you talk more about that committee, the composition of it, or is it in process of being formed now, or?
Candidly, sir, I would defer to the General Assembly. That would be an ad hoc committee that would be determined by the General Assembly, not by the department.
Okay.
Representative Love, follow up?
All right. Just a clarification, I did get the email that you all sent out about Davidson County's allocation, which shows the overall funding amount going from fiscal year 23 to fiscal year 24. It indicates a change of $47,502,753.98. That change also includes Metro's contribution, is that correct?
That's correct. The state contribution to that number is just about 12.7
Okay.
million.
So Metro's getting 12 million more.
12.7 million more from the state.
Okay.
The students of Metro are generating 47 million more. The adults are going to have, the state adults are going to have to put in 12.7. The balance of that would be from the Metro Nashville Public School System.
All right.
For Davidson County.
Really, the city adults.
Yes, that's right.
All right. Just a note of clarification, the email you all sent out, there's a miscalculation financially that you may want to look at. It's in the unique learning need number 5. You have 70% times 15,000 students, 15,737. It lists the funding amount at $4,411,798.12. I think it's closer to 70, possibly million. I could be wrong. But look at that.
Okay, well, we will look at it. I don't.
Because the next line has 75% times 1,600 students, and that amount is 8 million. So it's got to be more than 4 million if it's 15,000 students.
We are looking it up, sir.
Mother was a math teacher, so
Okay. Yeah, I was like,
I may be right. My mother. TSU math.
Representative Hurt, you're
So
recognized.
I'm just saying, just as a correction, I just want to make sure we get all the numbers right.
Yep, sure.
Because I think the bottom number is right, the 776-714-85347, but it's just that piece in there with the unique needs.
We are.
Yes.
We are doing the math on the Excel sheet, and it is reflective of like when we are doing the math. So if you are doing 70% times the number of students times 6860, which is the base, what it is generating is the numbers that we are seeing on the sheet.
4 million?
No, 4 million, 4.4, 75.5.
No, 70% of 6,860 times 15,000 is 4 million? That's that new master people.
I don't know. Do you want to see what he has?
You want me to show you? You want to show me on the sheet where you're?
Yeah.
Do you mind?
We're going to go, hey, while they have the side conference, we'll go to Representative Hurt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all for being here. I just want you to touch a little bit on what's included or what's covered in the base pay, so we can make sure folks are aware of that.
Sure. So I'm just going to. So in terms of the base, what we did is, and I think I spoke a little bit about this earlier, so I won't repeat myself, but we have the additional funding that is in the base. So right now we have just over $6.6 billion allocated to the base. If you take the current BEP and you take out the things that are captured in the weights or the direct funding, so that's special education, ESL, CTE, and at risk, then that leaves just under $6.5 billion. That's the BEP. So that additional funding helps to pay for the additional counselors and nurses in particular. It gets us closer on school psychologists, and it also covers that amount that was listed in the BEP review committee for RTI. So it is everything that is currently funded in the BEP with an additional approximately $114 million more added in.
Representative Hurt.
Thank you. And
go ahead.
Just a quick follow-up here. And as far as where you got the numbers from that, as far as the school, those numbers for the school ratios and all, I guess that's the question I'm leading to.
In terms of, can you clarify, are you talking about the numbers from the school districts for their budgets, or are you talking about the ratios in the BEP that have transferred?
Representative Hurt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm speaking of the numbers you included in there. You've got those numbers from a recommended ratio.
Oh, I see.
guess is
Yes,
what
sir.
I'm getting at. I wanted to get out in the.
Yes, sir. For nurses and counselors in particular, that is the national standard ratios that we used. 1 to 250 for counselors, and that's all grades. The BEP currently does not do that for all grades. And then for nurses, it's at the 1 to 750 ratio, which was the latest from the, I think it's the Healthy Families Survey at the national level.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Representative Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I have several questions here. Would you mind if I just had a running question?
Go right ahead until I cut you off.
Okay. Thank you. I think all this is probably on everybody's mind. So, getting to the base, following up on Representative Chairman Hurt's question, that 6860, how does that possibly include everything that you say it does? We've got a bill running parallel. What's the fiscal note of this legislation right now?
The governor is proposing to put in $1 billion extra dollars in public education. $250 million of that is for the BEP for this year. $750 would be if it applied to a new TISA formula.
750. So we've got a parallel bill running, and that's my question. That addresses the teacher pay, addresses the school nurse, only puts one public school nurse in each school, a full-time counselor, the RTI, program interventionist, technology coordinator, and that's all it does. And the fiscal note on that bill alone is $868 million. That exceeds the 750 you're wanting to put in here, that you're saying does even more than that. So I don't know how this 6860 amount is going to accomplish what you're alleging it's going to accomplish. Can you explain that for me?
I don't have your bill memorized or those dollar figures. I can say that everything that is currently funded in the BEP, we just went through those numbers, the extra 114 million. There's 2021 BEP Review Committee actually lists out what the dollar figures would be to get to those ratios. So that is in a public document. On top of that, if you want to look at the additions to all of the different levels, you've got the additional approximately $114 million to the base. You're looking at $1.1 billion that used to be for those things in the weights. That's gone up to 1.8. And then on the direct funding, that moved up from 201 million to 376 million. But to be clear, funding a nurse in every school is not the same thing as funding one nurse for every 750 students. The majority of our schools are well under 750 students.
Okay. So given that, well, and just for the record, the bill number is HB 1586, so you can compare it. I don't want to be misleading or misrepresent anything. So this allocation, that base doesn't automatically grow like the BEP automatically grows. How are we going to address that? I think we're requiring legislative action every year to address that, or at least at the end of the 4 years?
So every year, that would be through the appropriations and the budget approval that you all do. We would still do the regular growth, just like we do in the BEP, where we come and say we assume a 1% ADM growth every year. That would be something similar that we would do in any kind of proposed formula.
But the state legislature is going to have to address that every year in order for it to grow.
And that is similar to what you do now.
Okay. And talk to me about this 4-year time frame that's in here. About, I guess it was represented to me by one of your liaisons that after the 4 years is where the local match is going to catch up to where it is today. Explain that to me.
Sure.
How that works.
Absolutely. So when you look at that local bill, if we're going back to that analogy that you get at the end of dinner, so what districts together have to pay, what the state has done is we've actually decreased the total of that bill. So there's no freeze, no hold harmless. That's not the right way to think about it, right? And I know that that's some language I've heard. This is essentially saying this was the bill. We are lowering that bill. And so over the 4 years, that's how long it takes for that local share, that amount to catch up. In fiscal year 27, that is when it catches up to where we are right now. And then it will continue to grow at approximately the same dollar value on average as it does under the BEP. And that's anywhere from $60 to $65 million per year.
So at the end of the 4 years, though, it's going to require additional action by this legislature, because right now we're sitting this on a 4-year cliff. I mean, we are creating a cliff where it's going to continue to increase. And at some point, the locals they're going to catch up, just like you said, at the end of 4 years. And are they going to pay more? Who's going to cover that differential if the legislature doesn't take action that you're saying we have to take?
So to be clear, there's no difference than what you do now. Every year you approve a budget, right? So every year you approve the budget. When you approve new BEP allocations to keep up with that 1% ADM growth, it triggers additional money to the BEP that districts are already, or locals might have to increase every year. We are actually saying, instead of in fiscal year 25, 26, or 24, 25, and 26, because we have set the bill lower, it means that you won't have to have that total 30% increase. There is no additional legislative action outside of what you already do. The additional increase for counties that happen year over year happen every year under the BEP, every year. What we're saying is because we've actually lowered that local bill, it's going to take 4 years to catch up to where we are now. So there's no fiscal cliff. The rate of increase is the same as we are experiencing now. We've just lowered your starting point. We've essentially taken us back several years, and that's where we're starting. But there's no difference in what you do now. It just means that instead of locals paying more next year and the year after and the year after, which is what they will do under the BEP, we are lowering their bill so they won't have to start paying more money like they would under the BEP.
So it's your position that counties are not going to have to raise their property taxes? to compensate for their local share at the end of 4 years.
That is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that just like the BEP, your counties next year are going, some of your counties might see increases under the BEP. That is what happens every single year. What I am saying is that we are lowering the starting point now so that counties who otherwise would have had to have increased taxes next year, the year after, and the year after won't have to start doing that until fiscal year 27. It actually means that more counties won't have to increase taxes for longer. Under the BEP, that would start next year. Every time you put money in the BEP, we have approximately 5 to 10 districts who have to increase taxes every year. By lowering the starting point, it means those counties won't have to do that, and they have 4 years before they hit what their bill is right now.
Well, depending on the county.
I said, that's what I said.
So on the unique learning needs definition, and that's going to affect the adjustments, that definition is a little vague. What are the unique learning needs in this bill? I mean, you outlined, I think,
There's
examples. You have ELL, English language, dyslexia. What else is there?
Special education, and those are the option codes that exist under the BEP. There are 10 special education option codes under the BEP. We did the crosswalk to show which option code goes with which ULN. And then we also showed the addition of characteristics of dyslexia, which is not currently funded, and then the EL tiers.
Okay, your definition says it includes but is not limited to disabilities, characteristics of dyslexia, giftedness, or English language proficiency. What else could it include?
That leaves that language open in case there is some new legislation that passes. It allows for us to be flexible in response to statutory changes you might make as a General Assembly.
Representative Clemens, Chairman,
Yeah,
you had to
go
follow
ahead.
up on one of your
That's fine.
questions, if that was okay.
Yeah.
So, and I'm kind of concerned about this too. If you look at the numbers there, I see where you combine 7 and 8 and 9 and 10. What replaced at 4 and 5 that weren't there before?
So 4 and 5 so all the special ed option codes are there. 1 through 10 are still there.
Right.
When we took 9 and 10, we actually increased funding. Those are students who might be homebound, residential facilities, CDC classrooms. Those students with the most significant disabilities and needs, we actually are funding at a significantly higher level. So instead of that special ed option code being a 7, we've increased it to a 9. Instead of that special ed option code being an 8, we've increased it to a 9. Those students right now, 7, 8, 9, and 10, are all funded at a 8-to-1 ratio, approximately 8.5-to-1 ratio, meaning it is not the same amount of funding as they would receive in a new formula. So we've just increased that.
And I don't know the prior funding, and I know you can't think of this as the BEP, but if I take your sheet up there and I leave 7 and 8 separate, that's 180%. If I leave them together, okay,
So,
but we're condensing that to 125%.
so
I mean, and I
I'm
know
sorry.
it's hard to walk this
Chairman, can I?
cross.
Yes.
Okay, great. So if you look in the BEP Blue Book, what is making this confusing is actually a function of the BEP. The BEP, if you look at options 7, 8, 9, and 10, the BEP has 10 option codes right now. You look at 7, 8, 9, and 10. You will get 8.5 students per teacher. And then you have to figure out how much does that teacher make divided by 8.5, and then that's how you do all the calculations. That is very confusing. I would agree with you. Under this formula, instead you say this child generates an ULN 9. They are in a CDC classroom. They need significant additional supports. So they are funded at 125% of the base. That's it. That's the whole thing for that child. In the BEP, you would have to say, well, hopefully I have 8.5 students that qualify under special ed option code 8, and then I have to divide those 8.5 students among this one teacher, and somehow that one teacher is going to provide appropriate services to 8.5 children. And then that gets funded at a district level. Those children might not all go to the same school, which means now you've divided that teacher among 8.5 students who may be in very different campuses. You don't know that, right? This says this is about the kid. So if you take the BEP and the 85 plus pages of the computation guide, this says this is how you fund unique learning needs. I have a student with a disability. That child has a ULN of 8. So I know that I am going to get $6,860 every year to serve that child. It's that simple.
It's that simple.
It is multiplication, yes.
I understand that, but that's what I'm trying to get at here is you're saying this and we're absorbing this because we're going to have to go to our members and say the exact same things to them because I'm pretty sure if this gets to the House floor, you're not going to be on the House floor to tell our members what this does. So we've got to have this information. Representative Clemens, thank you for allowing me to do that. I appreciate it.
Before I go back to you, I wanted to add just two quick things, and this doesn't have to be a direct answer now, but just something to get back to us on. And maybe this is a quick answer. What's going to determine sparse? What determines rural? And are we going to be able to get a list of the counties that are fitting those criteria at some point? You may already have that. I may have just missed it, but if not, I'd like for the committee to be able to get that at some point.
Yes, so we're happy to resend that information. We have 25 schools that count as small and 80 schools that count as sparse. The small and sparse definitions are here with the references in terms of where that information came from. To be clear, if you're looking at small, it comes from the Small Rural School Achievement Program. Technically, under that federal designation, it's 600 students per school, or I'm sorry, per district. That is considered small. We increased that to 1,000. It is a 167% increase above what the federal government says. We also did that because when you look at the approximate median of district size in the country, it is 1,000 students. It is 45 to 50% of districts in this country are 1,000 or fewer students. So that is where we said, look, if we're at 600, that's what the feds say. Tennessee's a little bit different. Let's up that to what the median is. And so we increased it, like I said, 167%. For sparse, again, the federal definition is 10 students per square mile. When we mapped that above kind of some of the topography of the state, looking at kind of rivers and mountains and all of the beautiful parts of Tennessee, we said, and got feedback from the subcommittees that said that's not actually what makes sense for this state, and based on subcommittee feedback, increased that to 25 to 1.
All right, and we can get a list of those counties. It may have already been sent out, and I just missed it. But
we'll resend that to you,
all
sir.
right, the last thing I had was we've heard in about every meeting we've had discussions about where's this is the state board being taken out of this, and we've gotten answers on this. My two questions are is in current BEP code 49.1.302 and 49.3.305 it deals with the State Board of Education. One of that is you've mentioned the BEP Review Committee a few times today. So, it looks like that is being taken out in TISA, that BEP Review Committee and it being implemented by the State Board, that would be taken out, correct?
It would be replaced by the fiscal capacity or local contribution components. So they would have that oversight. And then the recommendations would then be at the district level because all of our districts are quite different. Some of the feedback we got from subcommittees and the public said we want to continue to have a voice. So now every district would be part of that review that you all would receive. But the State Board would have a replacement.
Sorry, excuse me.
Yeah, no, of course.
Would that remain public, like the current structure? Would that be available for the public?
Oh, absolutely,
okay.
Yes.
And just 49.3.305 doesn't have to be anything now, but if somebody could get back to me on that, that's also a place that the State Board was included that I was curious on. Representative Clemens, I'll go back to you. We interrupted you.
No, thank you. Please interrupt me and follow up on any of these questions. And I'm trying to limit this. I apologize. So getting to the sparse, how come there's not a weight for density?
So when we look at recommendations and best practice, there has been a real push for sparsity because of the cost of transportation.
And how much money is in here for increased transportation and bus driver pay?
So it is, are you talking about the base or are you asking about sparsity?
Yeah, either one. You tell me.
So the base includes, similar to, just like the BEP, funding for bus drivers and transportation that is currently funded in the BEP moves over to the base. There is now additional funding for those districts who have increased needs related to busing and transportation because of sparsity. We have to keep the minutes that students are on a bus to a minimum. That is one of the requirements. For very sparse districts, it requires longer routes. And so this covers the cost of additional bus drivers, additional buses, and the cost of transportation, gas, things like that.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I grew up in one of those areas, and I was always the last one on the bus, and I don't think they enforced those laws, unfortunately, when I was around the bus before I got kicked off. But
Sure.
You got it. But for different reasons. I mean, and you take Nashville, for instance, or Knoxville. I mean, you're dealing with traffic, and so you're still dealing with a time frame and busing, just for different reasons. So, my student doesn't get home from middle school some nights till he's like the last one on the bus now, and we live a mile and a half from the school, and it's an hour and a half after school ends. So, I guess I just want to get on the record. The fact that density is not considered is concerning to me. At the fourth grade tutoring, who's entering into those contracts for the fourth grade tutoring? If the LEA is the LEA deciding to enter into private contracts, or how's that going to work?
The state has no position on that. The only requirement in the law is that a student who is at the below level after the third grade is required to participate in one of multiple options. One of those is high dosage tutoring. The district makes the decisions on how that high dosage tutoring would occur. I would assume that would happen during the course of the normal school day using staff. That's what most of our districts are doing now.
So your liaison told me that they could contract that out and bring in a private contractor. So is there going to be a select list, or is the state going to say you can only use these contractors, or is it complete discretion of the LEA?
Complete discretion of the LEA.
Okay. And is there any K-2 funding in here budgetarily to account for the literacy stuff, or is that wholly within the other bill?
Yes, so it's in the direct funding, $500 for every K through 3 student in the state.
To address?
Literacy.
Just literacy,
Yes.
okay. I think I saw somewhere the $5,000 for CTE. Where does that come from? Where does that number come from?
Oh, the $5,000? Okay. So right now we fund $4,500 on average per student, and that includes all of the CTE elements within the BEP. When we looked at best practice from other states, what they have done is they've really tried to provide additional funding for those CTE pathways that are high demand, high wage, or high need within their regions. And typically those have higher costs in terms of machinery, equipment replacement, et cetera. So the additional money allows for and accommodates for those programs that might have regional need in terms of open jobs. And it allows districts to have more funding to support students within those CTE programs with more updated machinery and equipment.
With regards to the fiscal capacity, there's an annual review. Are you concerned that that's going to create more bureaucracy or more delay in any respect, given the fact that fiscal capacity has such a significant determination on this?
So I think that one of the pieces of feedback that we received was that fiscal capacity is not reviewed enough. And so one of the things that we wanted to do is to allow for that public forum and that format to provide feedback on that. It does not mean that a change would need to occur. I think even in this room now, we've had fiscal capacity applied in the BEP. And what we found over the course of talking with lots of stakeholders is not that many people really understand fiscal capacity, right, in the greater, broader Tennessee. And so having that annual review allows for these really important questions that we've had, such as what does Davidson contribute versus Williamson versus Knox versus Perry versus Johnson County, right? So that annual review allows for that open public discussion, to the chairman's earlier point, and certainly the state board's role in that would be to hear that public discussion based on some recommendations from the comptroller's office, and then that review would be provided to the General Assembly. We do that with the BEP now. We have a review of the BEP. This is making sure that we review the fiscal capacity, which is different than the formula.
Okay. And talk to me about this Education Finance Committee, this ad hoc committee. Where are the guardrails for this committee? It seems like they have a wide discretion as to a school comes in, a D or F or whatever. This committee, who's going to comprise that committee? Are there going to be guardrails in place for if this, then this? And because right now, basically, what I'm seeing in your presentation is they can take no action, corrective action plan, inspector general by the comptroller. How's that going to work?
So we would defer to the General Assembly in terms of committee makeup, just like any other ad hoc committee or committee within the General Assembly. Those are the actions that can be taken, but the questions, points of interest related to fiscal management as it connects to student achievement, those would be questions that I would defer to the General Assembly to ask, of course. In terms of what you are seeing in those three pathways or options, those are the three that are outlined in the bill.
Well, that just raises another concern of mine. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that you've represented that is in here and is going to happen, but it's not specifically outlined in the language of the legislation itself. And so it sounds like you're really relying on a lot of administrative rulemaking to really fill in the blanks here. That concerns me, given the Constitution, legislative rulemaking, and so forth. We often talk about administratively legislating up here. So that's a concern of mine that's overarching a lot of this. How much money that's being allocated under this or proposed to be allocated under this TISA plan will the State Department control and have the ability to contract out? How much money will you have control over to determine where it goes and how it's allocated with respect to any contracts?
Just the ACT. And we do that now for retake districts. All have individual contracts for the original. The only thing that is allocated here is we would continue to do the contracts for the ACT. And that's the post-secondary assessment line.
And so with regards to the weighting, do you not think, I'm concerned about charter schools and voucher program, if it's allowed to move forward or expands in any way in the future, how that throws off the weighting under the legislation. Do you have any concerns about that? And have y'all given any thought about how the weights are going to be, I guess, altered by the expansion of charters or voucher program?
So the weights that are outlined within the legislation would be in statute. So that 4% for the charter school facility line is the same as economically disadvantaged is at 25%. Those would all be codified. So if there were shifts in any charter school enrollment, the student would generate that weight just like the student would generate the weight for economically disadvantaged or concentration of poverty. I do want to make sure to add that we also increased the fast-growing infrastructure and facility stipend for traditional public schools. That is not currently something that is funded. We have actually increased that funding to allow for infrastructure and facility funds for traditional public schools in this proposal.
And then the 12 to 13 million, the charter weight.
Mm-hmm.
Explain that to me. What is that money going to be used for?
So that money, just for making sure everyone knows, that's recurring funding. We have $6 million that is recurring in the budget right now, has been recurring funding for a while. We had an additional $18 million that was one time. Charter school facility funding is something the General Assembly funds and has funded for a number of years. This essentially takes the funding that is currently outside of the BEP and brings it into a formula. One of the things that we wanted to do was to ensure that we could bring as much that is outside of the formula into one consolidated place for transparency. I think this is a really good example of a lot of folks didn't know certain things were funded outside of the BEP. And what we think is really important is people should know what state dollars are going to what.
Representative Clemens, I'm going to go to Representative Love real quick. Representative Love, go ahead.
Thank you, and I know this is the second week in Lenten season, so I want to put on my Reverend Love cap and extend a little bit of grace, all right? I do appreciate what you have done with the weights for economically disadvantaged students. I think that's important to note because when we had conversations about growth and about student performance, oftentimes poverty was only calculated once.
Mm-hmm.
And so the fact that you have poverty, concentrated poverty, conversations about economically disadvantaged students oftentimes gets glossed over. So I do want to, in this moment of grace, thank you for that and for the piece around our rural counties and, of course, English learners, because I think if we're talking about the different learning that occurs across the state, we have to make note of that and have to make sure that we equip our districts with as much as we can to get all of our students. So this is the second week of Lent, and so there's my moment of grace. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir.
We know y'all been going at this for about 3 of the last 4 hours. We're going to go, Representative Clemens had one more question.
Yes, sir.
And then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, I guess just final, I'm going to have more questions as we go through this, obviously, like everybody will. But I guess one of my bigger concerns also is what's the rush? This has been a 6-month process. I mean, if you look at Lamar Alexander, I mean, that took 2 years. Governor McWhorter, even when we were looking at court action, I mean, that took 2 years and actually failed twice, I think, before it came back and passed in the regular session. You've been doing this 6 months. I mean, you rushed a lot of meetings. I have a lot of people that feel like their voice wasn't heard. Committee recommendations of those 18 subcommittees, some of those final reports, the needs that were expressed weren't addressed. What's the rush? Why don't we back up, think through this, and really get to the point? Because like you said, I think my colleague said, he said 2 weeks. I think I haven't seen it for 2 weeks, but at least not the amendment. And why are we rushing this? This is too important. I mean, there is nothing more important than the public education system and how we fund it. And I would agree that the BEP needed revisiting. I mean, we need to look at this and figure out accountability, transparencies, maybe simplicity. I don't know if simplicity for simplicity's sake certainly isn't attractive if it doesn't benefit our students. But what's the rush? I guess that's my question.
So I think I would probably disagree with the framing. I think 30 years is a really long time to have a formula. We've gone through BEP review committee since 2004. I've read every single review committee from 2004 to 2021, and the thing that is the same is almost all of the recommendations. That is year after year after year of saying that we need something different and nothing happening. Governor Haslam had a task force in 2014. That was 1 year long. It produced a report after 1 year of engagement. The recommendations in that task force look almost identical to what we heard from the subcommittee feedback. So at some point, if you are hearing the same thing year after year after year, if you have already done as a state an entire year of a task force that has the same recommendations, and now we have a subcommittee process. And we've said from the beginning, not everything is going to get funded. We have to prioritize. It's the why can't I have everything argument, right? And so year after year, the same thing. It really just comes down to boldness and courage of actually wanting to take action and ensuring that the children in Tennessee right now, the children like mine and yours and everybody else's who are sitting in classrooms right now, get the benefit of actual action. We can be like other states who go round and round and say we're going to do it next year for 20 years. And there are states who have been saying they're going to do it for 20 years. But these are kids who need it now.
But that's my problem. I mean, if we get it wrong, we just 6 months. That's a short window of time. If we get it wrong, we may not come back around to this for another 20 or 30 years. I mean, that's problematic. And I'm not saying that should happen, but we have to admit that politics is politics and whatever, the realities of the world. If we get it wrong now, it might be wrong for a long time. And I want to make sure we get it right and take our time and do this in a thoughtful manner rather than sprinting to the finish line on this. That's all I have to say, Mr. Chairman. Thanks.
Thank everybody for their time today, their questions. Thank you for your presentation and answering our questions. Without objection, we'll go back into session. We will roll House Bill 2143 to the Hill. The remainder of the bills will also be rolled to the Hill. And I think I heard Chairman Reagan say his first meeting this morning was around 7 a.m., 6:30. He's already passed the 12-hour mark, so we need to get out of here. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
We stand adjourned.